Welcome to your character module. Today we're joined by Anna, who is going to be transformed into an alien for us. So what we've done to prepare for this is we've already put her in the wardrobe that we're going to be wearing. We pulled all her hair back out of her face because we have prosthetics for the ears and for the face itself, so we want to make sure that we have the space available with no hair interference as well. We've cleaned all traces of makeup off of her face. Remember, you can't have any remaining oils or creams or makeup on there. We need the prosthetic to adhere properly. And we do have contacts for her, though we did have a little bit of trouble putting them in before you put the prosthetics in, which is normally how you would want to do it. Remember, we were talking about. But because we had a little bit of a trouble getting them in, they can be pretty finicky sometimes. We're just going to wait to the end and see if we can get them in a little bit later. But the first thing we're going to do is jump in and start with the ears. So the order you put your prosthetics in is important. Think of the easiest things that you can do. So the ears are going to be fairly easy. There's not going to be much interference with the ears. It's not going to bother them too much to be sitting in there. So we're going to start with the ears and then move to the face. That way the face isn't sitting on for too long while we work on the ears and things like that. So the first thing we're going to do is take our ears. So we have the ears here, and you can see they have these little edges on the back. It's like a little glove that you just slip the ear into. So before we adhere anything, we just want to slip the ear in there and get a general idea of where it's going to go. So you can see pretty easily where it's going to adhere to from this. And once you've got that idea down, you can pop the ear off. And we already have some of our Prosthetics adhesive, which we did already do an allergy test with Anna to make sure that she didn't have any allergy test or any allergy to the Prosthetics. So we're going to take our Q-tips. And we have some of these little pointy ones, which are good for detailing and getting into it. But we're going to start just regular here. So remember, you don't need a lot of this. A little bit goes a long way. And we're going to start adding some adhesive. So for the ears are a little bit tricky because you need to be able to pull the prosthetic over where you're going. So instead of putting the glue all the way up top where it's going to be hard to get in, we want to put some glue towards the end here in the fronts. So we're going to put a bit of the adhesive here. That way we can tack down this front area and then wiggle on the inside with our cotton buds to get in everywhere else. So put some adhesive down. Give it a second to get tacky. And make sure too, this back has those thin edges too. Make sure that you're actually holding it open before you slide it onto the ear. That way this doesn't fold into itself. If it folds into itself and you try and remove it, you'll probably rip that edge and then lose the beautiful thin blending edge. So we'll just wait a second here for it to get totally tacky, which is almost there. You can tell it's almost totally clear. Remember, this glue will turn clear once it's tacky and mostly dry, so we're going to wait a moment. You can see too, it's starting, you can feel the stickiness to it. So now what we're going to do is hold the piece open, slide it over the top of the ear, wiggle little hairs out of the way, and then you want that to be pressed in about there. And then this one will go there. Now that we have the general idea of where that's going to go, we're going to work on the back area and really sticking these edges down into the back. So I'm going to use these little pointed Q-tips just to get some detail in on this. And I'm going to go from behind and underneath. So you're going to want to hold this in place, but you want to really get up underneath that piece. And remember, you don't want the edges to stick down yet, so try and keep this away from the edge as much as possible and use that rolling technique where you're rolling away from the edge instead of into itself. Now I'm going to take the dry end and use that to roll it onto the adhesive. see that front pop up. That's pretty normal for the different parts to get in and out, especially with the ears is a bit challenging to get around to all the tiny little areas you need to get into. And it probably feels really weird for the actor also. She's just Q-tipping their ears. The hair is really getting in your way, you can get some hair clips and use the hair clips to hold it down. Hairspray, I had used a little bit of water prior just to hold it back a bit. Once you've got that edge pressed down, just push a little bit of the Prosade on top of it to give a little extra security. Get around this side area. And remember too, this is gonna stick to these tiny little baby hairs, but that's okay because Prosade won't remove the hair. We could also too, depending on the ear shape, we can actually adhere this into the inside of the ear, which I'm gonna go ahead and do. I wasn't sure if I was going to because, again, these are generic prosthetics, so they're not always gonna fit everyone exactly perfect because this was not sculpted for her face specifically or for her ears specifically, so it might not always work that you're able to actually adhere down the inside area, but at least on this one we'll be able to. So I'm gonna make sure we get inside of there. And see if it'll stick for us. I think it will. Now my inspiration for this character was honestly Star Wars. I really like the idea of, you know, aliens living amongst us and they're just their own breed and their own group of people. So I wanted her not to be a scary alien, but to look like she could be someone who is in Star Wars, where she's just living her life as an alien. I wanted to be, I guess you could say, kind of a natural alien. So coloring, even though I didn't have her image prior, is actually fairly close to her skin tone, which is pretty good, that it matches pretty well. We'll still have some blending to do and a little bit more tone matching, but as a start, it's pretty, this ear already looks very natural on her. So the first ear is ready. We're gonna move to the second ear now. Okay, we're gonna work on our second ear now. So remember, before we actually glue it down, we wanna hold the outside. And we're trying to show you a bit more from the back this time. Just get an idea of where it's gonna go before we put the glue down. So we know it's gonna wrap around here, and then we'll be able to glue up front. So I can see visually about how far it's gonna go. Remember, you can always use that, that mapping with the powder if you don't feel so confident with the placement yet. You can always take a little bit of powder and put it around the edge. That way when you pop it away, you have that blueprint of where to go. And another thing too, regarding foam latex, is, I know we touched on it in previous modules, but you can't reuse foam latex. Foam latex pieces, In theory, some of them you might be able to reuse, and depending on what it's for, if it's for a film production or something that's going to be seen in HD really close up, I would not reuse them, just because in the removal process it can really damage those edges. They're very, very fine and they can tear really easily. So I wouldn't reuse it for something like that. But if it's something for theatrical or Halloween and you need it for a second day, something like that's okay if you're not really looking to get that. Of course you want the best quality possible, but if it's theater, it's much further away. So it's going to be easier to hide little imperfections than it will for something that's super HD and close camera-wise. Silicone though, remember, silicone you can reuse multiple times. It is much more expensive than foam latex to purchase, but it is a reusable piece. So now that the glue is tacky, we're going to go ahead and slip our little ear coffin on. Make sure it's aligned properly before you push down into the adhesive. Okay, got those front areas down. Now with our tiny little precision one, do you mind actually holding this cup over here? Thank you. And remember, you can have your actor or actress hold the cup of glue for you so you don't have to keep going back and forth so much. So go up as much as you can. Remember to stay away from those edges. And use that rolling technique. Give it a second to get a little bit tacky. And then lightly press in. So you want the ear to be in its most natural position. You don't really want to be pulling it too hard. You can lift it a little bit just to kind of see behind, make sure that you're actually getting it in places. But try to keep it in its relaxed, natural position. And remember too that you can move around. You should be moving around to make sure that you're seeing everything that you need to be seeing. Don't stay stationary. If you can't see where you're putting glue or anything, then move until you're in a position where you can see where it's happening. This is a real tight, tiny little area back here. You might feel more comfortable using a tiny little brush to get all these pieces in. Again, we're using minimal amounts of glue. I'm going back over the edge now with Pros-Aid, now that everything is adhered down. Just finishing and pressing the edges in to make sure it's all stuck there. We don't have any little pockets lifting up. And another thing too with the hair, when you're working on ears, the little hairs can kind of fly in there. You can also, once it's dry, you can take a little bit of your no color powder and just powder those edges. That way the hair doesn't actually stick into the adhesive. If you're doing something bigger where there's a ton of little hairs and a lot of adhesive in the way, there's always that as an option, remember. So now we're just finishing the front part. Going up underneath. This again will tuck in really nicely to the inside of the ear. Now, one thing to note too is when you're pre-painting a prosthetic, it's important to remember what colors you used. So if you were mixing colors, you want to remember the ratio of colors that you used. That way, when you're painting the rest of the face to match it, you can match the color to it, and you're not going to have to worry about, what was that color again? How did I make that? So once you do it enough and you know your products enough, you know, you can visual memory, especially if there's not too much there, which is what I'm going to do because I didn't use too many colors, so I remember what the bases were. So when we get into the painting process, we'll be able to accurately match them. I'm just painting. I switched to a brush for the glue on this one just because the ears are teeny tiny and this area was a little too difficult with the big cotton swab. So I switched to a brush to get up in the tiny corners. And I'm just gonna go around the edges once more. Okay, and the ears are done. We're ready to move on to the face.